In this video, I want to show you how to use the short row method called the wrap and turn to create the heel of a sock. So this is a short row technique that uses short rows where each row you're knitting a little bit less to create this shape of your heel, that trapezoid shape. And what you do in this case, we're starting at the toe, we're knitting up the foot, all the way up to the foot in the round. And then when we get to the heel, we're going to be knitting flat. We're going to be knitting back and forth. And for each row of the short row method, you're going to knit across and work one less stitch. You'll do your wrap and turn. You'll come back in the other direction, work one less stitch, do your wrap and turn. And each time you turn your work to go in the other direction, you are doing a wrap and turn, which creates extra fabric around each stitch. So we go back and forth all the way until all of these stitches on the edge have been wrapped in order for us to create this trapezoid shape. And what's important here is that that wrap and turn create some extra fabric around each of the stitches that we're not knitting, because when we turn our work and knit in the other direction, it can create holes. So we need that extra fabric around each of those stitches so we can reduce those holes or fill in the gaps of those holes when we turn our work. So this is what it looks like on the sides of our heel. And then once we have completed all those wrap and turns, we do what's called turning our heel and knit on the other side. And then this side, we're going to increase each time, going back and forth, working another stitch to lengthen the rows, and we're actually resolving those wraps. So that's using that extra fabric to fill in those holes. Then we can finish the leg and the cuff. And that is basically how we do a wrap and turn to make this little pocket for our heel. For the wrap and turn on the knit side, we're going to be creating these little wraps around each of our stitches. And this is what the wrap looks like around the base of that stitch. This stitch here is a little hard to see, but there's the wrap right there. And then this stitch here, you can see the V below the stitch on our needle. And that tells me that this stitch here needs to be wrapped when I turn my work. So this stitch has a wrap, this stitch has a wrap here and here. And you'll also notice the stitches are more widely spaced apart, and that's another way to tell which of your stitches have already been wrapped. So on the back side here, let's take a look at what those wraps look like from the other side. So right here is our wrap, the back side of that wrap on the back side of our work. Here's the other one, another wrap, and that one is hiding in there. And then this here is our purl bump. So that's how we also know that that stitch there still needs to be wrapped. And you can see how the yarn goes around this stitch on the needle. So it starts in the front here, comes around, and to the back side here of the stitch. Literally wrapping our yarn around that stitch. So we're going to wrap this stitch on the needle, not this one right here. We're going to slip it as if to purl. So insert our needle purlwise. If we do it knitwise, we'll twist the stitch. We don't want to do that. So slip it over to our right needle as if to purl. Move our working yarn to the front of our work. Then we're going to slip that seam stitch back over to our left needle, again as if to purl. We don't want to twist it. And then move our working yarn to the back of our work. And so we can see our working yarn wrapped around the base of the stitch on our needle. If I tug on it, you should be able to see that yarn moving. And I'm going to, right here is the back side of the wrap, and it comes around to the front here. If I tug on it, you can see it moving there. And I'm going to pull that out, and you can see how that yarn moves and how we've wrapped it around the base of that stitch. So we've wrapped that stitch right here, and now we can turn our work, and we're going to purl back across to the other side. For the wrap and turn on the purl side, it's a little more challenging to see those wraps. So I look down here, I see the spacing of the stitches, and I can see here, these look like wraps around those stitches to me. This one looks like a wrap. I think that's a wrap. This may be these here, I'm not quite sure. So if you're really not sure on the purl side, you can turn your work and look at the knit side. And when you're looking on the knit side, you're trying to find those knit V's at the base of the stitch on your needle. So here's a V, here's another V. I think this lime colored bit is a V. Not quite sure, but that looks like a wrap to me. Those all look wrapped to me. So I can at least knit or purl those two stitches and get to that one stitch that I'm not quite sure about. Let's just purl a couple more. And double check. That really looks like a purl bump, that lime green color. And on the back here, yeah, it looks like a V to me. So that's the stitch that we need to wrap before we turn our work. That one is wrapped, and that one needs to be wrapped. So on the purl side, first thing, we're going to slip that stitch from our left to our right needle, as if to purl, move the yarn to the back of the work, slip that stitch back from our right to our left needle, and bring our yarn back to the front of our work. So we can turn, and now that stitch has been wrapped, and we can knit back across to the other side of our work. You should have at this point is all of the stitches on the outsides of your stitch markers are wrapped, and these center stitches here in between will not get wrapped for the heel pattern. So every one of these has a little wrap around them that we will need to resolve, and same on this side over here. So what the pattern is going to tell you is to knit to your first wrapped stitch. In this case, it's going to be the first stitch we come to after our stitch marker. And right now we really don't need those stitch markers anymore. You can leave them on there if it helps, that's fine. But this stitch right here has a wrap around it. So you can see the front and the back of that wrap around the stitch that's on my needle. So here's the stitch on my needle, and here's the yarn that wraps around the back, and it comes over here to the front. And that is what we need to resolve. So what we're going to do is using our right needle, we're going to be picking up that wrap from the front to the back. You'll see that it looks like there's a front part and a back part. We're going to pick up this front part, or the knit side part, from front to back. and that's going to be on our right needle. Then we're going to use that right needle to slip the stitch that it was wrapped around. It should be slipped knitwise. I apologize that I didn't slip it purlwise. Knitwise, I slipped it purlwise. Like a slip knit. So now your left needle is going to go into the front legs of those 2 stitches like in a slip knit. And then you're going to wrap your yarn around the back needle, knitting those stitches through the back loop. And so we've resolved that first wrap and turn. Now we need to turn our work. So this stitch here needs to get a wrap. So we can't turn our work and knit in the other direction until we've wrapped this stitch. So just like before, slip as if to purl, bring the yarn to the front, slip back as if to purl, move our yarn to the back of the work. And now, if you notice, this stitch already had a wrap. This one right here, it had already been wrapped here, but now it's got a second one. So now we will have double wraps. Turn our work, and we're going to purl all the way back to the first stitch that has a wrap on the purl side. And that should be the first stitch after our stitch marker. So we'll just make our way back over there. Now we're going to resolve our single wrap on the purl side of our work. And this side can be a little bit tricky to see. So what we're looking for is the first stitch that has this wrap around the base of it. So on my needle, this is the stitch on my needle, and around it you can see this white leg and this dark pink leg. That is the wrap that is around the base of that stitch on my needle. So it starts here on the knit side, comes back around that stitch on the needle, and here's the dark pink side on the purl side. So sometimes if you're having a hard time seeing it, you can look on the back side of your work or the knit side of your work, and that can help you find that wrap. So the tricky part here is we want to pick up the wrap to resolve it with our right needle, but we need to pick up the knit side of the wrap. So not the pink one, but the white one here. And we're going to be picking that up from the back to the front. Once we get that stitch, that wrap, we're going to put it on our left needle, and then we're going to just purl those 2 stitches together, the wrap that we just picked up and the stitch it was wrapped around. So just purl those 2 together. Now we need to turn our work, but first this stitch needs to be wrapped. It already has a wrap. So this dark burgundy color here, that's the wrap that is already around that stitch. So we're going to wrap this stitch by slipping it purlwise, moving our yarn to the back, slipping it back over to our left needle, and then bringing the yarn to the front of our work. Once we've done that, we've wrapped that stitch again. So now it has a double wrap, the dark burgundy and then the white. So you will no longer be resolving single wrap stitches. Now every stitch that you resolve is going to have a double wrap. So we'll just knit across back to our first double wrap knit stitch. All right, on the knit side of our work here, we have come to our first double wrap stitch. And we've got these 2 wraps down here around the stitch in our needle. So there's the first wrap on top, and right below it is the second wrap. So we need to resolve both of those. To do that, we're going to take our right needle, We're going to go from the front to the back on the knit side and only pick up the knit side wraps here. Don't get that back part. And that's going to be on our right needle. And then you're going to slip, and it should be as if to knit. That stitch onto our right needle. Left needle goes through the front of all 3 legs, and we're going to knit all 3 stitches together through the back loop, just like you would for a slip-slip knit. Now this stitch here, it has a wrap already, but we need to turn our work, so we're going to wrap it again, and that's going to give it the double wrap. So now that stitch has a double wrap. We can turn our work, and we're going to purl back across all the way to the first double wrap on the purl side. Now we've knit to the first double wrap stitch on the purl side. So this is our stitch, and here are the 2 wraps around on the purl side here, that dark maroon one and this white bit here. And it goes all the way around to the other side. So on the back here, we can see these 2 white bits of yarn. Those are the 2 wraps around on the knit side, and those are the legs that we actually need to pick up. And this is the tricky part here. So with that right needle, we need to come around to the back and pick up those 2 wraps from the knit side of our work. So we're coming from the back to the front and getting those wraps on our right needle, back to front, and we're going to slip those wraps over to our left needle and then stick our right needle in all 3 legs and purl all 3 of those stitches together. That's the 2 wraps and the stitch it was wrapped around. Before I turn my work and knit to the other side, I have to wrap that next stitch, which creates another double wrap. And now I can knit back across my work to the first double wrap knit stitch. And that's how to work our wrap and turns.